CricketSong, and in this video I'm going to discuss the topics of cleansing, purification, and exorcism. I will define what I mean by each of these words, and then I will talk about how they work within my own witchcraft practice and give you examples of how I might use each of these in a practical sense. Now, I write about these topics in my book, Becoming Witch, Back to the Basics, and a lot of this information can be found in that book if you're interested. So, this topic of conversation came up because on my last video that covered consecration, June Westfield and I had a little conversation in the comments section, and these topics came up. So that's what inspired me to make this video. So thank you, June. All right, so cleansing. Cleansing is different from consecration. So is purification, and so is exorcism. From my perspective, these four things are different and are used in different ways. So a cleansing is when you physically and energetically wash an item or even a person of any impurities or residual energies that the item or person may have collected. So when I was Wiccan and we cast circle, we were cleansed first. So whether we took a ritual bath at home or whether we did some sort of ritual cleansing prior to entering our cast circle, we were cleansed before we were consecrated. And you can watch that video on consecration to understand what I mean by consecration and why you would consecrate an item. But cleansing is basically like, taking a shower, getting rid of the dirt collected throughout your day. It's also done energetically. So usually with the aid of visualization. You can do that in the shower too. You visualize your aura, your spirit being cleansed as you are physically washing yourself, right? So keeping in mind that even after you've consecrated an item, you can still do a cleansing after that. So if I consecrate my chalice, if I was Wiccan, or if I use a chalice or a blade, say I consecrate my blade. I don't do that now, but say I did. I can consecrate that blade, but I can also cleanse it later, because a cleansing will not remove any imbued or intentional energy put into that item. It just removes residual energies. So if someone picked up my blade off of my altar, not realizing what it was, I would cleanse it because I want to get rid of their energy from that blade. I want to keep that blade sacred. You might even want to do a cleansing on anything. Like, for example, I go to the thrift store. I love thrifting. I go to the thrift store and I find something there that really I feel called to purchase, to use in my practice. For example, I really love bowls and I love wooden spoons, little wooden spoons. So I tend to pick those up a lot when I'm thrifting. Anything that I purchase from a thrift store, because I don't know where it came from. I don't know who's owned it. A lot of people probably picked it up. I do a cleansing of that item. I wash away all the physical dirt and any energy that that bowl or that wooden spoon picked up while it was sitting in the thrift store, or even from the previous owner. I would cleanse that. So how would I actually do a cleansing on this bowl or spoon that I picked up from the thrift store? First, I would wash it. I may run it under running water. I may wash it with some moon water or some sea water or some rainwater. And then for me personally, similar to a consecration, I would just cleanse it with each of the elements. So in that water, that would have water, and if I use salt water, it may have earth mixed in there. If I use Florida water, I have my own recipe that also imbues air and fire into that, or I might pass the bowl or spoon through incense smoke and over a flame to get the element of fire. But I tend to do all my cleansing and consecrations with the elements. If you have a particular god or goddess that you work with, or you have a matron or patron, or you have any deity, you can work with deity in order to cleanse an item. You can just do a visualization. You don't even need to use the energy of the elements. There are many different ways that you can do a cleansing, and it can be very personal to you. So I believe cleansing is very important, but how you achieve that cleansing is really going to be a personal choice. So then that brings us to purification. So purification is different from cleansing in my perspective, though sometimes I know people may use the words interchangeably, but for me they're different. The purification returns the energy of an item to its natural energetic state and removes all the other energies. So if you had an item that you imbued with a specific energy, like a consecration, or maybe you did a spell and you imbued energy of that spell into an item, that item was your target for the spell, or maybe you did some other magical working and you specifically used that item as the target, then to remove that energy, you would do a purification, because it's the energy attachment to that item is deeper than just residual energy. It's energy that was purposefully put into an item. And purification will remove that energy. It may not remove all other energies, but it will remove the intended energy that you put, or someone else put, or a witch put into that item. So what's an example of that? A consecration. If you consecrated an item and you no longer wanted it to be consecrated, you could do a purification and it would remove the consecration. If you did a spell for more confidence for yourself and you put that intention in a piece of jewelry and you wear that jewelry and you're gaining more confidence, when you felt that that spell or that magical working was complete, to return that ring to its original sort of like state, that original energy that it would possess, you would do a purification. And what I mean by returning it to its natural state, because everything has an energetic vibration, depending on what that piece of jewelry is made from, it will carry a natural energy. So like if it's a piece of gold jewelry, it would have the energetic vibration of gold. If it was a piece of sterling silver, it would have silver. And if you put a intention into it, now that gold or silver ring not only carries the energy of that gold or silver vibration, it will carry that vibration of the intention that you put in the spell as well. So when the spell is complete, you want to remove the intention you put in to return it to its natural vibrational frequency. Sort of like a blank slate, but not really, because it still maintains its original vibrational energy. That is why you would use a purification. Now, how would you do a purification? Just like a cleansing, it's going to be dependent upon the witch who is doing the purification. Again, for me, I generally use the elements to help me do a purification. And generally, because it's such a deep cleaning, I would also call upon my spirit allies. My familiar will always help me in regards to that, but I might also call on my beloved dead or my ancestors or my spirit guides in order to help me do a purification, because we're looking at a deeper energetic frequency. So I'm looking for stronger entities or energies that would match that, because it's not just a surface cleaning. That's why I would do that. But again, depending on the witch, the way in which a purification is done could differ from person to person, witch to witch. So then that brings us to exorcism. Now, an exorcism will banish spiritual entities from an item or a vessel. So anything that would hold a spiritual entity, in order to remove it, I would do an exorcism. And this is because the connection of a spiritual entity is stronger than an intention that I placed. So that connection that was established between the spiritual entity and that item or vessel would be severed during an exorcism. Because that bond is symbiotic, usually, where the vessel or the item welcomed that spiritual entity on some vibrational level, a purification generally won't sever the bond. It requires a stronger rite or magical working in order to remove and banish that spiritual entity from the vessel. So, an example. We all know about, movies that we've seen where a person is possessed by a demon or a spiritual entity, and the Catholic priest has to come in and do the rite of exorcism. That's a very stereotypical example. But a more practical example that I've experienced is bringing an item into my home that was purchased at an estate sale. And I brought it home and I did a cleansing. I washed it down with my Florida water, and I did visualization to remove the imbued or the residual energy. And I still had issues with that item. There was still a lingering energy that was foreign to my environment that I had, my sacred space. Okay, so let's do a purification, because clearly something is still lingering in that item. So I do a purification, which again removes any imbued energy. That doesn't work. There is still clearly a presence in my home that I can still feel it. And after consulting with my spiritual army or my spiritual allies, it is clear that there is a foreign spiritual entity, and it is attached to that piece of furniture I brought into my home. That's when I would do an exorcism. Now I know how. How would you do exorcism? It's going to depend on the witch. Again, if you are a devotee or a priest or priestess of a specific deity, a god or goddess, or a god and goddess, I would urge you to consult the deity, the divine, in how you would handle this particular possession, this particular exorcism, this banishment that you're going to do of this spiritual entity that is attached or imbued or living in or possessing that, in my example, the piece of furniture. I personally, again, call on my familiar and my spirit allies. I use the elements. Sometimes I don't even have to go that far. Sometimes just sitting down and communicating with that spiritual entity and trying to determine or discern the reason for that spiritual entity being or living or residing in that piece of furniture, that item, whatever vessel that it's possessing, trying to determine the reason for that bond, seeing if there is some sort of resolution that I can handle without getting too aggressive. Because for me, trying to establish some sort of communication with the spiritual entity is my first option. It may not be your first option, but definitely if I find that that spiritual entity is not willing to leave, or I just am not comfortable trying to communicate with it, and my spiritual allies or my god and goddess or whoever I'm working with suggests that I just banish it without any communication, then I would use spiritual aid, meaning that I work with some sort of spiritual entities in order to banish the unwanted entity from the item or whatever the vessel is that it's possessing. Sometimes, honestly, I've had to do it more than once because that spiritual entity just did not want to budge. So that is the difference between cleansing, purification, and exorcism. And for more information on consecration, like I said, you can watch the other video in which I discuss it. I do use purification, cleansing, purification, and if needed, exorcism in my personal practice. I no longer use consecration. As I've said, I have in the past, but I no longer find the need to consecrate items. But cleansing and purification are definitely two things, two concepts that have a role in my current practice. So I'm curious about you and your practice. Do you use cleansing, purification, and or exorcism? What has been your experience? If you're willing to share how you do these things, please do so in the comments section. And until next time, I love you. Mwah. Blessed be.